I was 70 years old the winter I decided to drive up to the mountains alone. My name is Mirabelle Keene, and for the first time in months, I wanted nothing but quiet. No phone calls, no polite obligations, no reminders that my usefulness ended the moment I retired. I had built my cabin outside Asheville, tucked high in the Blue Ridge, as a promise to myself. After my husband died, I sold the house in Raleigh, used what we had saved, and made a home where I could still hear my own thoughts. The road that wound toward it was steep and narrow, the kind of road that punished hesitation. I drove slowly, letting the mist roll across the windshield. Pines leaned over the lane like watchful sentries. I loved that stillness, the kind that presses on the chest, but somehow steadies the heart. My knees ached against the gas pedal, yet there was comfort in the ache. It reminded me I had lived long enough to own something built by my own hands. As the miles fell behind, I thought of the last call from my son, Corin. He had sounded distracted short, as if talking to me had become a chore. His wife, Tamsin, hadn't answered any of my messages for weeks. I told myself it was nothing people get. Busy young families have their noise, but the silence had begun to feel like a border. When I reached the final bend, I slowed to a crawl. My chest tightened, though I couldn't have said why at first. 3 cars stood parked in the gravel drive, none of them mine. One was Corin's dark sedan, the same one I had helped him finance 2 years ago. The others I didn't recognize: a silver crossover and a pale blue compact with a dented bumper. For a long moment, I sat behind the wheel, listening to the engine idle. The air smelled of wet pine and wood smoke, yet something in it felt wrong. My hands trembled as I turned off the ignition. I stepped out, the cold air wrapping around me like a warning. From the porch came laughter, bright, careless laughter that did not belong in my home. The sound drifted through the open windows, joined by music, clinking glasses, a woman's high voice telling a story I could not make out. My heart began to beat in my ears. I climbed the porch steps, each one heavier than the last. The front door stood half open, and warm light spilled across the boards I had sanded myself the year before. I pushed it wider. Inside, someone's coat. Hung on the rack, a woman's scarf draped over my chair. My photographs were gone from the wall. In their place, strange decorations shimmered under the light. And then I heard it, clear, sharp, full of ownership that wasn't hers. "Get out, you old intruder." The words hit harder than the mountain cold. I stood in my doorway, too stunned to breathe, realizing that the laughter inside was no accident at all. The door creaked wider as I stepped inside. Warm air hit me first, the scent of spiced candles, perfume, and something cooking that wasn't mine. My living room looked like a stranger's showcase. The woven blankets I had folded neatly over the sofa were gone. My grandmother's quilt had been replaced by a pale throw that still had the price tag tucked beneath it. On the mantel, the photos of my parents and my late husband were missing. In their place stood glittering frames filled with faces I barely knew. Tamsin's parents smiling in front of a lake, their arms around each other, as if the world had never said no to them. Tamsin Vale herself sat in my favorite armchair, one leg crossed over the other, a glass of red wine balanced between her fingers. She wore one of those pale sweaters that looked expensive, but had no warmth. Her eyes flicked up from her phone to me with a cool sort of irritation, not surprise. "You could have called first," she said. "We weren't expecting guests." Guests. The word stung more than the cold outside. My voice caught in my throat. Corin was by the window, half hidden behind the curtain. His shoulders hunched as if shrinking might make him invisible. "Corin!" I managed my voice barely above a whisper. "What is going on here?" He didn't meet my eyes. We thought you were still in the city. Mom?" From the kitchen, a man's voice cut in low and self-assured. "We've just been helping around Mrs. Keene." A tall man stepped out, broad shoulders, graying hair, a clean shirt that strained around his stomach. Weldon Vale Tamsin's father. I'd met him twice before. He always spoke like someone giving advice no one asked for. Behind him came Iris, his wife carrying a tray of half-empty glasses. "Oh, Mirabelle," Iris said, her smile practiced and soft. "This must look strange, but Corin told us you'd offered the cabin for the winter. We thought we'd make it cozy." "Offered," I repeated, my palms tightening. "When did I offer that?" Corin opened his mouth, closed it again. Tamsin filled the silence. "He told us you were fine with it. The house was sitting empty and it just seemed wasteful. You've said yourself you barely come up here anymore." She set her glass down with a clink. "We cleaned, stocked the pantry, fixed the internet. You're welcome, by the way." Her tone was bright and sharp, the kind people use when they're covering arrogance with manners. My heart thudded against my ribs. "You took down my photographs," I said quietly. "They didn't match the new color scheme," she replied, turning back to her phone. Corin finally stepped forward. "Mom, please, it's not what it looks like. We just..." Tamsin's parents were between places, and the rent in the city. Between places. Weldon interrupted, his voice calm, as if explaining simple math. "We sold our condo. Needed somewhere while we look for land. Corin mentioned this cabin, said you wouldn't mind." I stared at my son, waiting for denial, but he wouldn't lift his head. My fingers went numb. Iris placed the tray on my table, and smiled again. "You really should have called, dear. We could have prepared the guest room for you." The room spun with their words. Guest offered welcome. Each one stripped a piece of belonging from me. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. "This is my home," I said softly. "Not a guest house. Not a rental. Mike?" Tamsin sighed, finally putting her phone down. "No one's saying it isn't. But it's been months, Mirabelle. We thought, well, it's family. Family shares." Her calmness chilled me more than shouting ever could. I looked at Corin again, searching for something. Remorse, courage, but his face had the color of paper. "I think I need to sit," I said, my knees trembling. "Of course," Tamsin replied lightly. "Just anywhere but that chair." The one she was sitting in. My chair. I stood still, unable to move, as laughter drifted from the kitchen, where Iris poured more wine. The house I had built as refuge had turned into a stage where I didn't belong. I kept my voice trapped behind my teeth, afraid that if I spoke again, I'd start to scream. Tamsin stood, setting her wine glass down with a snap that made everyone look at her. "You can't just barge in here like this," she said. "It's rude, Mirabelle." "You scared us half to death." "Rude," I repeated quietly. My voice shook, but not from fear. "I own this house." She laughed, short and sharp. "You owned it, sure. But you never come up here anymore. It's been sitting empty for months. Corin said you were fine with us staying. You're lucky we're keeping it warm." Corin's eyes darted toward me. "Mom, listen, it's just temporary," he said quickly. "We didn't think you'd mind. Tamsin's parents needed a place and the apartment lease." I cut him off with a look. "You didn't think I'd mind?" My words came out steady, almost too calm. "You're living in my home without permission, and you didn't think I'd mind." Tamsin crossed her arms. "You're making this bigger than it is. We didn't destroy anything. You should be thanking us for taking care of it." Iris moved closer to her daughter, whispering something I couldn't catch. Weldon cleared his throat like a man about to issue a verdict. "Mrs. Keene, maybe it's best you calm down. There's no need for all this tension." The way he said "calm down" scraped against my nerves. I turned to my son. "Corin," I said, "look at me." He didn't. "Mom, please don't start." "Look at me." When he finally did, I saw it, the small, frightened boy who used to hide behind me when he broke something, now hiding behind his wife. Tamsin exhaled loudly. This is ridiculous. You're trespassing, Mirabelle. You didn't even call first. If you'd given us a heads up, we could have. I stared at her. What did you just call me? She hesitated, then doubled down. You're acting like a trespasser. You stormed in here shouting and accusing everyone. If you weren't Corin's mother, I'd already have called the police. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. I felt the heat drain from my face, replaced by something cool and electric. It wasn't rage. It was clarity. I took one slow step toward her. Then call them, I said. Tamsin blinked. Excuse me. Call the police if you have the nerve, I said again. Tell them there's an old woman in the house she bought with her own money standing in her own living room asking why strangers are drinking wine in her chair. The air went still. Corin opened his mouth. Mom, don't what I said. Don't remind you whose name is on the deed. Don't ask why you let them erase my photographs. Tamsin's fingers tightened around her phone. You can't threaten me. I'm not threatening anyone, I said. I'm sitting. And I did. I crossed the room slowly and lowered myself into the couch across from her. The room seemed to tilt. The fire snapped. Someone's glass clinked. Tamsin didn't move. Her face went pale under her makeup. You wanted to call the police, I said softly. So do it. Go ahead. Let them come. No one spoke. Corin rubbed the back of his neck eyes on the floor. Iris fidgeted with her bracelet. Weldon shifted his weight like a man reconsidering his side. I folded my hands in my lap, steady now. For the first time since walking through that door, the trembling stopped. You've mistaken my silence for weakness, I said, not raising my voice. That was your first mistake. Tamsin's lips parted, but no sound came out. I looked at her, at my son, at the people who had turned my home into their playground. I didn't shout. I didn't plead. I simply sat in my chair, the owner of the space, the keeper of the truth. And in that silence, every one of them began to realize what they had done. The knock came 10 minutes later, 2 hard raps that cut through the frozen air in the room. Tamsin straightened immediately, relief flickering across her face. Finally, she said, grabbing her phone, that'll be the police. She hurried to the door and swung it open with dramatic urgency. Officers, thank goodness you came. There's a woman here who broke in. She refuses to leave. 2 deputies stepped inside Boots, leaving faint prints on my rug. One was a tall man with weathered hands, the other a younger woman holding a small notepad. The older one looked at Tamsin, then at me. Ma'am, who's the homeowner here? Tamsin spoke before I could open my mouth. That would be my husband and me. This woman is his mother. She's confused. She barged in. She's lying, I said evenly. I'm Mirabelle Keene. This is my house. The male officer's eyes shifted toward me, uncertain. Do you have any proof of ownership, ma'am? Tamsin smirked, already certain of victory. Oh, please. She doesn't have anything. She's been having trouble remembering things lately. We were just trying to help. I have everything. I interrupted. My voice didn't shake. I reached for the leather folder I had placed near the entry table when I came in. Deed, tax receipts, power bills, every document in my name. I handed the folder to the younger deputy. She flipped through the pages, carefully scanning signatures, dates, county stamps. The room fell silent, except for the faint rustle of paper. Corin shifted uneasily, his face pale. Weldon coughed into his hand, muttering something to Iris, who stared at the floor. The officer turned to her partner, holding up the deed. Name matches her driver's license, she said. Tax payments are current. Utility bills all under Mirabelle Keene. The older man cleared his throat and faced Tamsin. Ma'am, it looks like Mrs. Keene is the legal owner of this property. The smirk slid off Tamsin's face so fast, it was almost painful to watch. That can't be right, she said. Corin said he told us she'd given it to him. Corin opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His throat worked like he was trying to swallow something too big. Sir, the officer said, turning to him. Did your mother give you ownership of this property? No, Corin whispered. She didn't. The words cracked in the air. Tamsin took a step back, color flooding her cheeks. So what? She can just throw us out. After everything we've done here. The younger deputy closed the folder and handed it back to me. You're within your rights to ask anyone here to leave, Mrs. Keene. Do you want to press charges for trespassing? I looked at Tamsin, then at my son. No, I said quietly. Not tonight. The male officer nodded. Then I'll document this as a civil misunderstanding, but they'll need to vacate immediately if that's your wish. Yes, I said. I want them gone. Iris tried to speak, her voice trembling. Mirabelle, dear, we didn't mean… You meant exactly what you did, I said. You all did. Tamsin folded her arms, eyes darting toward Corin as if daring him to intervene. Say something, she hissed. He didn't. He just stared at his shoes, shoulders collapsing under the weight of silence. The officer stepped aside, waiting near the door. The light from the porch fell across the table, where the folder still rested, my name printed in bold ink. It felt like the only solid thing in the room. Tamsin turned to me, her voice shaking now. You've embarrassed us in front of everyone. No, I said, my words steady. You embarrassed yourselves when you decided to lie. Corin finally looked at me. His lips parted as if to speak, but I saw no defense left in him, only the small, raw shame of a man who knew the truth, had just taken everything apart. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't look away. The officers had just stepped outside to give us privacy, though their silhouettes still hovered by the porch. The moment the door closed, I turned toward my son. Sit down, Corin. He hesitated, but something in my voice made him obey. Tamsin crossed her arms defiant while her parents lingered near the kitchen, pretending to tidy up. I placed my folder on the table again and opened it slowly. The sound of paper sliding over wood was louder than any of their excuses. I'm done listening to lies, I said. Now I want numbers. How much have I given you, Corin? He blinked, startled. What? Mom, this isn't… Answer me. I don't know exactly, he stammered. You helped here and there, for the down payment for the car. I pulled out a document, unfolded it, and laid it flat between us. $42,000, I said. That's what I transferred to you over 5 years. Add the monthly help for your mortgage, your car insurance, and the gym membership. Tamsin begged me to cover, and we're at $68,000. The color drained from Tamsin's face. You kept records, she said. I keep proof, I replied. Receipts, transfers, emails. Every time you said, just this once, Mirabelle, I wrote it down. Corin rubbed his hands together, his voice cracking. Mom, I was struggling. You said you wanted to help us get stable. I did, I said. But I never said you could build your life out of mine. Weldon muttered. 68,000 is exaggerated. I looked straight at him. No, Mr. Vale, it's documented. Would you like to see the breakdown? He looked away. I unlocked my phone and opened my banking app. As of now, I said every automatic transfer in your name is canceled. Mom, wait. I'm canceling the car insurance. I've been paying $300 a month. Gone. I tapped the screen. The mortgage support, $800 monthly. Gone. Another tap. The gym payment, $150. Gone. Tamsin lunged forward, voice sharp. You can't just… I can. And I just did. The air grew heavy. The only sound was the faint click of each confirmation. Mom, please, Corin said, his voice breaking. I'll pay you back. I promise. Just don't cut everything off. We'll drown. You've been drowning on my dime, I said softly. And you never learned to swim, he pressed his palms to his face. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Tamsin's control cracked. Her words came out like shards. Do you realize what you're doing? We have bills. We have responsibilities. You're sabotaging your own son. I rose from my seat. No, I'm rescuing him from the illusion that he can live off someone else forever. Tamsin slammed her palm on the table. You heartless woman. You think cutting us off will teach us a lesson? It'll ruin us. Then maybe ruin is the best teacher left, I said. Corin stood up suddenly, his voice trembling. Please, Mom, don't do this. We'll lose the house. You already lost your home, I said, meeting his eyes. You lost it when you let someone call me a trespasser inside it. He froze, and the tears he'd been holding finally spilled. I placed my phone face down on the table. The screen dimmed to black, but the silence it left behind was final. Tamsin whispered something under her breath, but I didn't listen. My folder sat between us like a gravestone for all the years I'd mistaken enabling for love. Outside, one of the officers called through the door. Everything all right in there? I took a long breath. It is, now, I said. Corin didn't move. His hands shook, his lips trembled. And I saw maybe for the first time the cost of truth when it arrives too late. The officers stepped back inside the cold air, rushing in behind them. The younger deputy glanced at her watch. Mrs. Keene, since you've confirmed ownership, will proceed with voluntary departure. They have 30 minutes to collect their belongings and leave the premises. 30 minutes, Tamsin barked. We can't possibly pack everything in 30 minutes. The male officer met her tone with steady calm. Then take what you need and return later under Mrs. Keene's permission. But right now you need to vacate. Tamsin stared at me as if waiting for mercy. I gave her none. You heard the officer, I said quietly. 30 minutes. Corin ran a trembling hand through his hair. Mom, please start packing, I said. Use your time wisely. The room broke into motion. Tamsin stormed up the stairs, her voice sharp and panicked. Iris followed, whispering prayers under her breath. Weldon moved like a man made of stone, collecting glasses, closing drawers, muttering about injustice. Corin stayed still for a long moment before bending to gather the bottles and plates from the table, his shoulders sagging with every clink of glass. I remained standing by the doorway, my hands clasped in front of me. My pulse was calm, almost unnervingly so. I had waited years to reclaim my dignity, and now that it was finally here, it didn't roar. It whispered. From upstairs came Tamsin's voice, high and breaking. Do you see what you've done, Corin? We have nowhere to go. Nowhere. I told you she wouldn't forgive this, he answered faintly. You wouldn't listen. Iris's sobs echoed down the staircase. She's your mother, Corin. You can't let her do this. We're family, family. The word landed like a stone dropped in water, rippling empty, then gone. The younger officer approached me quietly. Do you want us to supervise until they're gone? Yes, I said. Just to be sure. She nodded and stepped aside. The older one kept near the porch, arms crossed, watching the chaos unravel. Tamsin came down first, dragging a suitcase and 2 handbags. You'll regret this, she said through clenched teeth. You think this makes you powerful? It makes you pathetic. I didn't answer. She brushed past me so close that her perfume lingered in the air like defiance. Iris followed, red-eyed and trembling, clutching a coat over her nightgown. Weldon carried the last bag without a word, his jaw tight. Finally, Corin came down the stairs holding a single suitcase and looking at me as if searching for the mother he used to know. Mom, he whispered. I'm sorry. I looked at him, my voice steady but soft. I know you are, but sorry doesn't rebuild trust. He nodded, eyes glassy, and stepped outside. The officers followed them out, waiting as they loaded the cars. I stood in the doorway, arms folded. The engines sputtered to life, one by one. Tamsin didn't look back. Iris waved weakly through the window. Corin lingered for a few seconds longer, his face pale against the reflection of the porch light, then drove away. When the last car disappeared down the hill, the younger officer turned to me. They're gone, ma'am. Thank you, I said, and closed the door behind them. I slid the deadbolt in place, one slow turn that echoed through the empty house. My hands didn't shake. Outside, the wind moved through the pines. Inside, only silence remained, wide, heavy, and entirely mine. When the door shut behind the officers, I stood alone in the silence they left behind. It wasn't an empty silence. It pulsed alive with all the words that had been spoken, and the ones that never would be. The house looked stripped. Half-empty glasses still lined the table crumbs on the floor chairs askew. I picked up a napkin, then another. Cleaning steadied my hands when my heart couldn't. I moved through each room slowly, gathering the fragments of what they'd left. The smell of cheap perfume and wine, the sound of their laughter still clinging to the walls. In the corner of the living room sat a stack of cardboard boxes I hadn't noticed before. They were labeled in Tamsin's neat handwriting, "Old Stuff." I knew before opening them what I'd find. Inside were my photographs' faces from decades ago. My parents on their wedding day. My husband with his arm around me on our first anniversary. Corin as a child holding a wooden airplane. They were all piled together, frames scratched glass, cracked in places. As if memory itself had been tossed aside. I lifted one picture, the one of my mother standing in front of her sewing machine, smiling with tired eyes. "You'd tell me I waited too long," I whispered. "But I did it, Mama." I stopped them. I began hanging them back one by one. Above the fireplace went my parents' portrait. Next to it, my grandparents' stern faces softened by the light of the fire. Then Corin's childhood photo, the one where he'd lost his front tooth and laughed anyway. I hesitated before placing it back on the wall. For a moment, I just held it. The boy in that picture had once believed I could fix anything. Somewhere along the years, I had let him believe it was true. The hammer's soft tap filled the quiet room. Frame by frame, the house began to look like mine again. The faces on the walls seemed to watch me, patient and proud. The smell of pine from the floors mixed with the faint ashes from the cold fireplace, sharp and familiar, like coming home. When the last photo was hung, I stepped back and looked at them all. Every image was a story I had lived, survived, or paid for. My knees ached, so I sat on the couch. The same couch Tamsin had called her spot. I leaned back and let the quiet settle. The house no longer felt invaded. It felt cleansed. But under the calm was something heavier. Grief, I realized. For the years I had given away too easily. For the son I had lost to comfort. For the woman I had once been who thought love meant surrender. A tear slid down slow and silent, and I didn't wipe it away. The fire crackled softly as I lit a new log. The walls glowed with the reflections of faces long gone, each one a reminder of how much strength it takes to reclaim your own name. The peace that filled the house was strange, heavy enough to hurt, light enough to breathe. That night, the cabin creaked as if it were exhaling after holding its breath for too long. I sat at the table with my folders still open, papers spread like the aftermath of a long war. Numbers blurred into memory, every transaction, not just a payment, but a moment I had mistaken for love. I thought of the first time it happened. Corin had been 23, wide-eyed and broke after losing his first job. He came to my apartment, shoulders slumped, voice cracking, as he said he couldn't make rent. I had just received my first raise in years, money I'd planned to use for a small trip to Maine, something quiet, something mine. Just this once, Mom, he'd said, "I'll pay you back in 2 months, I promise." He never did. I told myself he was young, that life was teaching him hard lessons, and that I could help him stand again. What I didn't see was that I was teaching him something too, that his mother would always be the safety net. Then came the credit cards. He had racked up $5,000 in debt, buying things he couldn't even remember owning. "I didn't mean to let it get this bad," he said. They kept sending offers in the mail. I remember sitting on my sofa, holding the statement in my hands, feeling sick at the sight of all those numbers. I paid it off that same week, thinking I was saving his future. What I was really doing was erasing the consequences he needed to learn from. Years passed and it became a pattern panic apology rescue. Every time I told myself it would be the last. Every time it wasn't. The biggest wound came wrapped in white lace. The wedding. Tamsin had wanted a grand ceremony floral arches string quartet, imported wine. It's the most important day of our lives, she'd said. We deserve something special. Corin had promised they'd manage the expenses together. I agreed to help with a small contribution, $5,000 no more. But when the venue demanded more money and the decorator raised the prices, I became the solution again. Mom, we can't cancel everything now, Corin pleaded. People are counting on us. By the time the reception ended, I had spent $15,000, 3 times my promise, twice my comfort, and all of my patience. I remember standing in that crowded hall under chandeliers I had unknowingly paid for watching Tamsin twirl in her glittering gown. She looked radiant, triumphant, while I stood near the exit holding an empty champagne glass and wondering how I had become a guest at my own son's happiness. The final blow was the mortgage. They bought a house beyond their means, proudly showing me pictures of the open kitchen and big yard. It's an investment, Tamsin said. A family home. A month later, Corin called again, his voice small. Mom, we're short on the down payment. Just for now, I'll handle the rest. And I did it. I wired the money, added my name as co-signer, and tied myself once again to his mistakes. Each act felt like devotion at the time. Only later did I realize it was a slow kind of erasure of boundaries of dignity of myself. The folder lay open on the table, a ledger of my heart disguised as financial records. Every dollar was a memory of silence, of choosing peace over confrontation. I used to think that was strength, to fix, to forgive, to give, until there was nothing left to give. But as I traced those old signatures, I finally understood the real cost. It wasn't $68,000. It was 30 years of self-respect, bartered away, won just this once at a time. And in that realization came the sharpest ache of all, not anger at my son, but the quiet, unbearable guilt of knowing I had helped build his dependence with my own hands. The next morning, the mountain air felt thin, as if even the wind knew something had shifted. I sat at the kitchen table, my phone in one hand, my banking folder open beside me. The sunlight caught the edge of the paper's records of a life spent paying for other people's comfort. I scrolled through my account. Each line carried a memory car insurance for Corin, $800, for the mortgage, $150 for Tamsin's gym, even a few auto payments for their streaming services I never watched. It was all there, neat and endless. I opened the banking app and took a breath. My finger hovered over the first entry. Cancel, I whispered to myself. Cancel it all. The confirmation flashed. 1 down. I kept going. The car insurance canceled. The gym membership gone. The monthly mortgage transfer deleted. By the time I reached the last one, my hands were trembling, but not from regret. It felt like exhaling after years of holding my breath. Then came the hardest part, the phone call. A woman's voice answered after 2 rings. Good morning, this is First Federal Bank. How may I help you? This is Mirabelle Keene, I said. I need to remove my name as co-signer on my son's mortgage. There was a pause, polite, but sharp. Of course, Mrs. Keene. I can help you with that. May I ask why you're making this change? Because I should have done it years ago, I said softly. She hesitated, unsure if she'd heard me correctly. I understand. Please hold while I connect you with our mortgage department. The hold music filled the silence, light piano, cheerful, cruelly calm. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear and stared out the window at the faint trail of tire marks still visible in the dirt from the night before. Finally, another voice came on. Mrs. Keene, this is Marcus from Mortgage Services. You'd like to remove your name from the account ending in 2891. Yes, I said. Effective immediately. He cleared his throat. To remove yourself as co-signer, your son will need to refinance. If he's unable to qualify, the loan may be considered delinquent. Are you aware of the potential consequences? I am, I said. Let them fall where they belong. He was quiet for a moment. Understood, ma'am. I'll process the request and send you the necessary forms. You'll receive a confirmation email within 24 hours. Thank you, I said, and hung up before I could change my mind. For a long time, I sat there listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the wall clock, the soft beat of my pulse in my throat. My hands were still shaking, but this time it wasn't fear. It was release. I closed the folder, slid it into the drawer, and locked it. Then I placed the phone face down on the table. There were no more transfers to make, only the slow work of learning how to live without rescuing anyone. And for the first time in my life, that felt like love. The phone rang just after noon. I didn't recognize the number, but something in me already knew who it was. I let it ring twice before answering. Mirabelle, please don't hang up, Iris said, her voice trembling. I need to talk to you. I closed my eyes. Iris, listen, we went to the bank this morning. They told us you canceled everything, your mortgage contribution, the car insurance, even the small payments you used to make. Corin doesn't know what to do. He's falling apart. I leaned back in the chair. He'll have to learn. You don't understand, she rushed on. They can't make the mortgage without your help. Robert earns $1,800 a month. The payment alone is $1,400. Then there's the car insurance, $300, utilities, $250. That leaves almost nothing. Her words came out like bullets, numbers she thought would wound me. But I'd been living with numbers far longer than she had. I understand perfectly, I said. He and Tamsin can still live if they stop pretending to be wealthy. She earns, doesn't she? About $900 a month, Iris said after a pause. But there are 4 of us under that roof. Me, Weldon, the 2 of them. We have our medications, doctor visits. I cut her off gently. Then it's time to adjust. If they live within their means, they'll survive. Sell the car. Use public transport. Share expenses. It's not impossible, Iris. It's called responsibility. She went quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, softer, strategic. You've always been so strong, Mirabelle. I wish I had half your discipline. But please think about the children. Corin's your only son. You don't want to see him lose his home, do you? That house was never mine to lose, I said. She sniffed loudly. We're old Mirabelle. Weldon and I are 67. We can't start over. If they fall, we fall with them. You wouldn't let that happen to family. The word family slid through the phone like bait. I almost laughed. For years, I said I've been paying for a family that treated me like a stranger. When I walked into that cabin, do you remember what your daughter said to me? Silence. Then softly, she didn't mean it. She meant every word. My tone hardened, and so do I. No more money, no more rescues, no more pretending that enabling is love. Please, Mirabelle, Iris whispered. We have nowhere to go. We don't even have savings. I picked up a pen and did the math out loud. 2 incomes, $2,700 total. Subtract the mortgage insurance utilities, $1,950. That leaves $750 for food and medicine. Tight, yes. Impossible, no. She didn't respond. I could hear her breathing shaky and uneven. It's time, I said quietly, for all of you to learn how to live within what you earn. That's the only lesson left I can give. Then before she could speak again, I ended the call. My hand shook for a second, not from guilt, but from the weight of standing firm. The numbers didn't fit for them anymore, but for once, my boundaries did. It started with a voicemail. Corin's voice strained, defeated. Mom, please call me back. I lost my job. They said I was late too many times. The bus route changed and I can't afford a car without the insurance. Please, I don't know what to do. I listened once, then again. The sound of his voice cracked something deep inside me, but I didn't call back. I placed the phone on the counter and went outside instead, letting the cold air press against my chest until it steadied me. 3 days later, another message. This time from the bank. 1 mortgage payment overdue, second notice pending. The polite tone of the woman's voice barely hid the warning beneath it. I didn't delete the message. I let it sit there, blinking on the screen like a reminder of every choice that had brought us here. By the second week, the calls multiplied, unknown numbers, messages from Weldon, then Iris. Her voice sounded like dry paper crumpling. Mirabelle, please. We're drowning. Corin's trying to find another job, but no one's hiring. Sharon's working 2 shifts, and Weldon, he's sick again. His heart, they said. We can't afford the medication without help. I pressed the phone to my ear, listening to her sob. My hands wanted to reach for my wallet, for my checkbook, for anything that could make it stop. But I didn't move. When she finished, I spoke quietly. I'm sorry, Iris. I truly am. But I can't fix this anymore. There was silence. Then a sharp, broken laugh. You sound proud of that. No, I said. Just done. She hung up without another word. 2 days later, Corin showed up at my apartment in town. I opened the door and nearly didn't recognize him. His clothes hung loose, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. He held a stack of envelopes in one hand and a crumpled hat in the other. Mom, he said they sent a foreclosure notice. We're 30 days behind. I'm begging you just until I find work. I motioned him inside. He didn't sit. He dropped the envelopes on my table like evidence at a trial. I'm trying, I swear. But everything's falling apart. Dad. He caught himself, then corrected. Weldon collapsed yesterday. He's at the clinic. The bills are piling up. Tamsin's furious, says I ruined everything. And she's right. I did. I wanted to reach for him, but I kept my arms still. You didn't ruin everything, Corin. You're just living what you built. He looked at me as if I'd struck him. So that's it. You'll just watch us lose everything. I watched you use everything I had, I said softly, and it didn't make you stronger. It made you dependent. I won't repeat that mistake. He sank into the chair, covering his face with his hands. I can't fix this. You can, I said. It just won't be easy. You'll have to sell what you can, move somewhere smaller, start again. People do it every day. I'm not people, he muttered. No, I said. You're my son. That's why this hurts more than anything I've ever done. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he stood up, his voice trembling. You've changed. Yes, I said. Finally. He hesitated at the door, then left without looking back. When the engine of his borrowed car faded into the distance, I sat down at the table and unfolded one of the envelopes he'd left behind. Notice of delinquency. Black print, red stamp. It was real, final cold. I folded it again and slipped it into a drawer. Not as a keepsake, but as proof that freedom has a price, and I was done paying it for everyone else. Outside, the wind rose through the pines. For the first time, I didn't mistake the sound of their struggle for my responsibility. The phone rang as the light began to fade. The mountains outside were turning blue, and the air had that stillness that comes just before night settles. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in the silence around me told me to pick up. Hello? There was a pause, then a voice I hadn't expected to hear again. Mirabelle. It's Tamsin. Her tone was unsteady, smaller than I remembered. I didn't say anything. I just waited. I know I'm probably the last person you want to talk to, she said, her breath uneven, but I needed to call. I don't even know where to start. Start wherever the truth begins, I said. She let out a short, shaky laugh. You were right. About everything. I leaned back in my chair, the phone warm against my ear. Go on. I thought I was strong, she said. That I could handle everything, that Corin and I could build a life better than yours, without sacrifices, without limits. But I was wrong. We were spoiled. I was spoiled. Her voice broke. I'm cleaning houses now. Nights, mostly. Sometimes mornings if someone cancels. My hands ache, but I can't complain. It's the first time in my life I've earned something that's really mine. I said nothing. The sound of her breath filled the pause. My parents are moving into a rented room next week, she continued. It's small, just one bed, but it's what we can afford. Corin's working at a warehouse. He leaves before sunrise and comes home too tired to talk. We don't fight anymore. There's nothing left to fight about. I closed my eyes. I could picture it clearly, the exhaustion, the quiet repentance that follows too much pride. I used to think you were cruel, she whispered, that cutting us off was punishment, but now I see you were saving us from ourselves. From me. I heard her sniffle a quiet attempt to keep composure. You have every reason to hate me, Mirabelle. For what I said in that house, for how I treated you. I still don't know how I could have looked at you and said those things. I took a slow breath. Hate doesn't survive where truth finally enters, I said softly. It just dissolves. I don't expect forgiveness, she said quickly. I'm not calling for that. I just needed you to know that we're learning. It's awful and humbling, but it's real. I let the words sink in. She wasn't asking for help, not this time. She was asking to be heard. Change, I said finally, is expensive. But it pays well if you keep going. There was a small sound, half a sob, half a laugh. That sounds like you. Good, I said. Because you sound different. I am, she said. At least I'm trying to be. The line went quiet again. I could hear her breathing steady now, and I imagined her standing somewhere dimly lit, a phone pressed to her ear. Her pride finally quiet enough to let something new grow in its place. Tell Corin I said that I hope he keeps working. Not for me, not to prove anything, just for himself. Tell him I want him to know what real strength feels like. I will, she whispered. Thank you for picking up. When the call ended, I didn't feel triumph. Only a stillness that reached somewhere deep and old inside me. Outside, the last light slipped behind the trees. I sat there listening to the quiet hum of the evening, the phone still in my hand. Humility had entered the world where arrogance once stood. And maybe, just maybe, that was how rebuilding began. The call came on a cold Wednesday morning. I almost didn't answer. It was an unfamiliar number one of those long ones that usually belong to telemarketers or survey companies. But something in me said, "Pick up, Mrs. Keene." A man's voice asked, formal, but kind. My name is Dr. Marius Holt. I'm a financial counselor with the Winston Community Program. Your son Corin has been meeting with me. My heart thudded once slow and heavy. Oh, yes, he said. He gave me permission to reach out. Normally, I don't call family members, but he specifically asked me to speak with you. He thought you should hear something from someone neutral. I gripped the edge of the counter. Go on. He came to see me about 6 weeks ago, Holt continued. When he arrived, I expected another routine case, overextended spending bad credit, a few missed payments. But within 10 minutes, it was clear this was different. His voice softened. He brought a folder with him. Inside were printed copies of bank transfers, your transfers. He told me he'd added them up and couldn't believe the total. He said he'd never realized how much you'd given him. My throat tightened. Did he say how much he thought it was? He did. $68,000 over 5 years, Holt said quietly. And he cried the entire time we went through it. I don't mean a few tears. He wept. For a moment, the sound of his words became distant, like hearing something underwater. He said Holt continued that he'd treated you like a bank because he was afraid of facing himself. That you'd built a safety net so strong he forgot gravity existed. I swallowed hard, my voice small. He said that he did. And then he told me something that stopped me cold. What was that? He said. My mother didn't abandon me. She finally stopped letting me abandon myself. The room went very quiet. I could hear the faint ticking of the wall clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the whisper of the wind against the glass. Dr. Holt. I said finally. How is he now? He's different, Holt said carefully. He's working 2 jobs. Day shifts at a warehouse, night shifts at a local grocery. He's saving every dollar he can. He's living with Tamsin in a small apartment, nothing fancy, but it's theirs. He's budgeting down to the cent. And more than that, he's stopped blaming anyone. I sat down the phone, pressed close. He isn't asking for help anymore, no, Holt said. He's asking for structure, for discipline, for purpose. Not money. I closed my eyes. He never liked being told what to do. Not even as a boy. Holt chuckled softly. Then you'll be proud of this, he told me. He doesn't want to see a single dollar that isn't earned through work. He said, if I take her money again, it'll mean I learned nothing. Tears stung my eyes before I even realized they were coming. I wiped them quickly, afraid they'd fall into my voice. Dr. Holt, why did you call me? Because I've seen a lot of families, Mrs. Keene, he said. Parents who enable children who manipulate, and a cycle that never ends. But this one broke the pattern. And I thought you should know that your choice, the hardest one a parent can make, may have saved your son's life. I couldn't speak. The words were too big to hold all at once. Corin will keep making mistakes, Holt said gently. But they'll be his own. He's learning to stand. Thank you, I whispered. One more thing, he added. When he left my office yesterday, he said he's not ready to face you yet, but he will be. And when he comes, it won't be to ask for anything. He said, when I see her again, I just want to say thank you. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, alive, trembling, with something that felt like release. Dr. Holt. I said, my voice low. You've done more than you know. He hesitated, then said, so have you. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time staring at my hands. They didn't shake the way they used to. Outside, the mountain wind brushed the cabin walls, soft and rhythmic like the world exhaling. For the first time, I didn't wonder whether Corin would change. I already knew he had begun. And though I didn't say it out loud, a thought lingered like a prayer change that begins in tears, might be the only kind that truly lasts. Winter settled slowly over the mountains, the kind of cold that carried silence with it. My mornings became simple again. I woke early, made tea, and watched steam rise from the cup until it vanished. There was no phone ringing, no requests, no guilt disguised as duty, just quiet. I started tending the small patch of soil behind the cabin. Most people thought gardening in winter was pointless, but I liked the ritual, the careful clearing, the patience it demanded. I pruned the brittle stems, turned the earth, and whispered to the sleeping roots beneath. It was less about growing and more about remembering that life waits beneath stillness. My neighbor Clara began stopping by every few days. She was younger than me by a decade, a widow too, but her laughter filled spaces mine had once feared to enter. One afternoon, she appeared at the porch with a tin of cookies and a scarf around her neck. You've been hiding up here, she said, brushing snow from her coat. I thought maybe you froze solid. I smiled. Not frozen, just thawing differently. She chuckled. That sounds like something a poet would say, or someone who's finally tired of chaos. We shared tea at the kitchen table. Clara talked about her grown sons, the one who'd moved to Charleston, the other who never called. I listened, nodded, and for once didn't feel the urge to fix anything. After she left, I lingered by the window. The world outside looked softer in its muted colors, the sky like pale linen, the pines dusted with snow. I used to look at this view and feel lonely. Now I looked at it and felt ownership, not just of the land, but of myself. That night, I took the brass lamp out of its box. I had ordered it weeks earlier after one long evening of reflection. It gleamed under the kitchen lights, solid, weighty, beautiful. On its base was the engraving I'd chosen, built by boundaries, kept by respect. I brought it out to the porch where the old fixture hung, crooked and rusted. My hands, though slower than they used to be, worked with purpose. Unscrewing, fitting, tightening. When the new lamp clicked into place, I turned it on. A warm light spilled across the wooden steps, bright against the frost. I stepped back, the cold biting at my cheeks. The glow reached out just far enough to touch the road, the same one Corin had driven down so many months ago, leaving behind the mess that had once defined us. I whispered to the air, "Let it stay lit, but not for return for remembrance." Inside, the clock ticked softly. I sat in my favorite chair, the one Tamsin had once claimed, and opened a book. The words came easily now, my mind free enough to wander without guilt chasing it. Sometimes I thought of them, Corin and Tamsin and even Iris and Weldon. Not with anger anymore, not even sorrow. Just understanding. People build their prisons out of comfort and call them homes. I had spent years paying the rent on someone else's cage. Now I finally lived free. Clara stopped by again a few evenings later. She looked at the new lamp and smiled. "That's beautiful," she said. "The light makes this whole porch look alive." "It's supposed to," I said. "It's a promise." "To who? To myself." She nodded her breath, forming clouds in the cold. "Then it's about time you kept one." When she left, I stood on the porch a little longer, the brass warm beneath my fingers. The wind hummed through the trees, low and steady. I wasn't waiting for a knock on the door anymore. I wasn't waiting for an apology or even closure. The lamp glowed steadily against the dark, unbothered by the snow. I turned to go inside, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, peace that didn't depend on anyone else's understanding. The house was quiet again, but not empty. It held breath warmth and something softer than forgiveness. Dignity rebuilt one choice at a time. And as the porch light burned through the winter air, I finally believed peace can exist even without apology. It just needs to be claimed. Snow had been falling since morning, a slow, quiet kind that didn't rush to cover the ground, but took its time settling. The cabin smelled of cinnamon and pine from the candle I'd lit before sunset. I'd made a single mug of cocoa and set an extra cup beside it out of habit. Old gestures take longer to fade than people think. It was Christmas Eve. I had no plans, no visitors, no noise. Just the wind, brushing against the windows and the steady hum of the new brass lamp outside glowing like a heartbeat against the dark. The phone rang a little after 7. I almost didn't move to answer. So many calls in the past had come with requests. Apologies shaped like bargains. But something about the timing, Christmas Eve, the hush of it made me pick it up. "Mom." His voice was soft, uncertain, and older somehow. "It's me." I didn't speak right away. I just listened to the silence that came with his words, the kind that used to frighten him, the kind he'd once tried to fill with excuses. "Corin," I said finally, "you sound different." "I am," he said. "Or I'm trying to be." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "That's a good start." He took a shaky breath. "I wasn't sure you'd answer. I wasn't sure I would," I admitted. That earned a small laugh, low and real. Fair enough. For a while, neither of us said anything. I could hear faint movement on his end, traffic in the distance, someone calling out, maybe the hum of a store heater. Then he said, "I'm working 2 jobs now. The warehouse and a delivery shift in the evenings. It's not much, but it's ours. We're paying bills, staying ahead. No more debt. No more late notices." Something caught in my throat. That's good to hear. Tamsin's cleaning houses with her mom. She's trying too. We don't fight as much. I think we finally learned what peace costs. I closed my eyes. And how it's earned. He hesitated, then his voice softened. "I used to blame you, Mom, for everything. For the house, the money, even for how small I felt when you said no. But I see it now, you weren't punishing me. You were saving me. My eyes burned. I gripped the phone tighter, afraid the sound of my breathing would give me away. I wanted to call, he continued, because I owe you something I never gave before. Gratitude. You gave me everything I needed, even when I didn't deserve it. And when you stopped giving, you still saved me because you made me grow up. I couldn't hold back the tears then. They came quietly warm against the cool of the room. I don't want money, he said quickly, almost panicked. Please don't think I'm calling for that. I just wanted to say thank you, that's all. My voice barely came out. That's all I ever wanted, Corin. The line went silent for a moment, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of things finally said, of things that no longer needed to be explained. Are you alone tonight? He asked. Yes, I said, but not lonely. I figured you'd say that. I could hear him smile. Tamsin wanted me to tell you Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to both of you, I whispered. He hesitated, then said, We'll come by in the spring if you'll let us, just to visit. No requests, no arguments. I'd like that, I said. Spring's a good time for new beginnings. We stayed on the line a little longer. He told me about the people he worked with, how his hands ached from lifting boxes, but how the ache felt honest. He said the small apartment was cold, but theirs that they'd fix the leaky faucet themselves. Every word felt like a brick laid on solid ground. When we finally said goodbye, the snow had thickened outside, blanketing the porch in quiet white. I stood there with the phone still in my hand, the brass lamp casting a warm halo over the steps. I whispered to the empty air. He's standing now. Inside, the second cup of cocoa had gone cold, but I didn't mind. I poured it out onto the snow, watching it vanish in a small plume of steam. Then I turned off the lights and stood at the window, watching the lamp burn against the winter dark. Love had changed its shape, no longer a net to catch, but a light to guide. And for the first time in years, I knew when love stands on its own feet, it doesn't vanish. It finally learns to walk beside you. It had been 3 weeks since Corin's Christmas call. The snow was beginning to thaw around the edges of the porch, revealing the dull brown of earth beneath. Each morning felt quieter, but not empty, just settled like dust that had finally found its place. That evening after dinner, I sat at the kitchen table with a blank sheet of paper and my old fountain pen. The brass lamp on the porch glowed faintly through the window, its light steady and patient. I thought of Corin's voice, soft but certain, and of Tamsin's call before it. How different they both had sounded. Something inside me wanted to answer, not with words spoken, but with something written. I began slowly. Dear Corin and Tamsin. The pen moved easier than I expected. I've thought about everything we said and even more about what we didn't. You were right, it wasn't easy for any of us, but life rarely is. I spent too many years trying to shield you from consequences that were meant to teach. I wanted to spare you pain and ended up feeding a kind of weakness neither of us could name at the time. I paused. The next words came with the kind of honesty that burned as it formed. I forgive you. For the shouting, for the silence, for the months when I was nothing but your means to survive. I forgive you because I finally understand that you were living the lessons I gave you. I taught you to depend, and then I punished you for doing it. That's a weight I'll always carry, but not as regret as clarity. My hand trembled slightly, but I kept writing. You asked me once why I changed so suddenly. The truth is, I didn't. I simply stopped pretending that love means sacrifice without limits. I love you still, but differently now, without expectation, without rescue. I hope that one day, when you look back, you'll see that stopping the flow of money was the only way to start the flow of truth. I stared at the half page of words at the tiny ink smudges near the margin. For the first time in a long time, my handwriting looked calm, unhurried. You have your life now, one you're building with work and with care. I have mine, and it's smaller but whole. Maybe someday we'll meet at this table again, not to beg or defend, but simply to share a meal as equals. Until then, this letter is my way of telling you I am at peace. I signed my name, Mom, and sat back. The paper glowed softly under the lamp. For a long time, I just looked at it, reading each line until the words blurred. Then slowly, I folded it in half, slipped it into an envelope, and wrote their names on the front. I held it between my palms. It felt heavy, like something alive. I stood up, walked to the small cabinet near the stairs, and opened the drawer that held my most private things, my husband's watch, a pressed magnolia leaf, and the property deed, the document that had once caused so much division. I placed the envelope beside it, its edges brushing the paper that bore my name in bold ink. I didn't seal it. I didn't stamp it. I didn't plan to send it. Forgiveness. I realized wasn't a letter that needed delivering. It was a way of living quietly without resentment. It wasn't about letting them know I'd moved on. It was about truly doing it. I turned off the kitchen light and stood by the window for a moment. The brass lamp outside shone against the snow, warm and sure. My reflection looked back at me, older, softer, but no longer broken. The letter would stay in that drawer unmailed, but not unfinished. It had done its work the moment I wrote it. I whispered into the stillness. Some stories don't need reunions to end well. And then I closed the drawer gently, the sound small but final as the house settled into its own kind of peace. Snow drifted lazily across the ridge, soft and slow, like it had nowhere urgent to be. The town of Asheville below was hushed under winter's breath rooftops, white streets quiet. From my porch, I could see the faint outline of the old road winding down the hill, the one Corin used to take when he came to visit. It looked smaller now, distant, like a path that belonged to someone else's life. I had just finished sweeping the porch steps when my phone buzzed on the windowsill, a message. Unknown number. But I recognized the rhythm of it, the careful punctuation, the habit of ellipses that always gave away more emotion than the words themselves. You were right. We're learning. No greeting, no name. It didn't need one. I sat down slowly, my knees grateful for the rest. The snow kept falling, a quiet curtain between the present and everything that had come before. I read the message again. It wasn't an apology, not exactly. It was smaller, humbler, like the first breath after a long silence. I typed out a response, my fingers hesitating over the screen. I'm glad I wrote. Then I stopped. I erased it. I didn't send anything. Instead, I looked at the phone for a long moment, then set it face down beside me. The number would stay blocked a little longer. Not out of spite, but to give the lesson time to root. Some bridges needed silence before they could be crossed again. The brass porch lamp flickered as the wind changed. I stood and reached up to tighten its glass cover. My reflection glimmered faintly in the brass, aged yes, but steady. On the base, the engraving caught the light, built by boundaries, kept by respect. I remembered the night I installed it, the cold biting my fingers, the smell of metal and newness, the trembling I mistook for fatigue, but later realized was release. I hadn't known then that peace could feel like this, not loud or triumphant, but calm, deliberate, earned. Clara stopped by earlier in the week with a loaf of bread. She'd laughed, said, "You're glowing more than that lamp these days." I'd told her it was just the light playing tricks, but she'd shaken her head. "No, Mirabelle," she said. "It's what happens when you stop living in other people's storms." She was right. I watched the snow thicken until the world outside looked weightless. Somewhere beyond it, Corin and Tamsin were building a life from scratch, learning the math of humility and gratitude. Maybe one day they'd come up this road again, maybe not. Either way, I'd be here steady beneath the lamp's warm glow. Inside, the clock ticked softly. The house no longer echoed. Every space felt filled by air, by breath, by peace. I reached up and touched the lamp once more. Its warmth pressed against my palm, alive and certain. For the first time in my 70 years, I whispered, I was the priority, and that wasn't selfishness. That was freedom. The snow fell harder, softening the edges of the world, and the brass lamp stayed on steady and bright against the quiet ridge.